Okay, let's talk about importing session data from one Pro Tools session into another Pro Tools session. This is really, really easy and really useful in a lot of cases. What we're going to do is import the session data from this session into a brand new blank session, and it'll create just an identical session to this one by just reading the session data. Then I'll show you a really quick way to use moving session data from one Pro Tools session to another Pro Tools session when you're tracking, and just to speed up the process of doing a bunch of songs in one day and whatnot in a recording session. So this is our original session. It's got all the tracks. It's got a headphone mix, Q mix for the artist, as well as our mix, and everything panned out. It's got markers. All right. So to go from Pro Tools session to Pro Tools session, it's really, really easy. You don't even need to export anything. All you need to do is create a blank session. I'm going to do 4824 to keep it all the same. That's what we're working with. So once you have a blank session and I want to import the data into this session, you go to File, Import Session Data, or Option Shift I, and find the session file, the PTX file of the session that already has all the data, where we're going to get the data from. This opened right to it, so I'm going to select that, and it'll bring you this Import Session Data menu. So up here in Source Properties, it gives you the properties of the original session that we're taking data from. Just a nice reference to see what you're working with. Time code mapping options and track offset options. I'm not going to go too deep into these, but this is a way to tell the new session to change the locations of the clips and media that you're importing. So maintaining the absolute timecode values will keep all of the clips and media coming in and being placed on the timeline exactly the way that they are in the original session. Offset incoming tracks too. This is cool because you can do bars, beats, any of these other things. I could say I don't want the session import right at the top. I want a little room, so I'm going to start on bar 9, and that will kick all the clips and media over 8 bars and then start them here and still keep the relative relationship of all the clips and media to each other on the timeline. All right, so media options. This is pretty important if you are moving clips and media from one session to another. So link source media where possible. This is like the add and add all button when you import audio. It will not copy the clips and media into your new audio files folder. It will reference the clips and media in the original sessions audio files folder. This, if you're working on the same computer all the time, isn't a problem, and it won't create duplicates. You won't have 2 audio files folder with the same audio. But if you choose to move this session off this computer and separate the original audio files folder, you'll open your session somewhere else and it'll have missing audio files. So you might not want to do that. Copy from source media will copy the audio files folder from the original into the new one. It'll copy all the clips and media. Consolidate from source media looks at what clips are actively in the original session's timeline and copies just those ones. So if there's any kinds of audio clips or whatever that you're not actually using, it's not out on the timeline and actively being played, it will not copy those. This could be a way to create a new session and not bring as much data with it, to have a smaller session size, save some hard drive space. But you won't have that stuff if you need to edit from it later, so just be sure what you need to do. Force to target session format. This, if anything, you're trying to bring over is of a different source properties like sample rate, bit depth, wave files, if they're AAF files, whatever. This will force everything you bring over to convert to whatever the new session wants it to be. So I'm going to do copy from source media here because we want to create a duplicate session that's just basically exactly like the original. We're not converting anything, so we don't need to worry about this. This is just where you would convert if you needed to. Down here in tracks, it lists all of the tracks that are in the original session. So I'm going to go ahead and select them all and then shift click And this means that it will bring all these tracks in and create a new track for them. Down here at the bottom, session data. So these things are kind of your, I don't know what you call it, like whole session information, universal information. So it pertains to the entire session. Tempo, meter map, key signature, markers, memory locations. I'm going to bring these in because we did have some markers. I want to bring them. I don't know if we really did a meter map or changed the tempo, but just in case. Windows configuration and mic presettings, we didn't do any of that stuff, so I'm not going to worry about it. Import, replace existing playlists. So this is if you want to bring the playlists or alternate takes in playlist of tracks into this new one, you need to click import. All right, and then track data import. So each of these tracks, the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, all have their own data. And this is a list of all the data that each track has. So there are, like the kick has its clips and media, its clip cleaning and effects. If you do that, it's any volume automation settings, pan automations, anything you got mix and edit groups. This would bring in the groups so that we know what groups, if they were already created, what we would do. All right, so I'm going to keep it on all because that's what we're doing. Once I hit OK, it's going to start importing them. So it's loading them in. I believe it's slowly copying them over to the audio files folder. This window, if you go here to Window, Task Manager, you can actually see when Pro Tools is doing processes in the background, you can see all the processes it's currently doing. So here, you can see it's processing the audio. And you can see it over here, importing slowly. All right, so the cool thing is we got our markers. The audio clips are all in here. They look like they're lined up exactly the same way in the timeline. We have all our tracks labeled exactly the same way. It even knew to mute and things I had muted and not. Kept the inputs and outputs the same. This interface, I don't have anything on here set up for track or anything. So it made the cue track. It made the master. Let's look across here at the mix window. So it brought our headphone mix exactly the same. It brought our mix exactly the same. Looks like everything came in here. We even have our groups. So it's that simple. We just created basically an exact copy of the original session. I don't know how often I create exact copies. Usually what I'll end up doing is importing session data when I want to only bring selected things in to like simplify the sessions, or maybe I don't need everything, or maybe the tracking session has all kinds of junk that, extra tracks, all the stuff that I don't want, and I just want a clean session with the essential parts. All right, so lastly, let's close this. This I'll save. I'm going to close this. Let's open up that original session again. So now what I'm going to show you, in a tracking scenario, this is really, really useful. So just to speed the process up. So let's say we track take 1, 2, and 3 of this song. The artist is still in there. You're going to keep the mic set up the same way. Everything's set up the same, but you want to do the next song. You can, depends on style, just do them in series and make a marker and say, song 2, and just do your takes and do it all in one session. But what if you want a new, fresh session for every song so that later on they're all separate? You can, we're not going to do exactly the same thing in every song. We don't want exactly the same session for every song. So what you can do to speed up the process, instead of having to make a new session, recreate all the tracks, recreate a whole headphone mix, do everything all over again, and spend however long that takes you to do that while the artist just sits there and waits, you can import session data into a new session and just not bring the clips and media or anything you just recorded for the first song. You do this in the same way. I'm going to close the session. I'm going to create a new session. We'll name it, tracking import 4824. You want all your settings to be the same, especially if you're tracking. You want it to stay the same the whole day. So I'm going to get import session data. I'm going to pick that original session. This would be from the first song. A lot of this stuff doesn't matter if I'm not bringing clips and media. Timecode mapping, offset, media options, doesn't matter. I'm not bringing it, not converting anything. I do want to make sure I select all the tracks so I can bring in the exact tracks I need to continue recording. I don't need any of the session data down here. I don't need a tempo meter map, key signature, markers, and memory locations because I want all new ones for the song. Import and replace existing playlists. Doesn't matter. There are no playlists. The key thing here is that I select all tracks, and then in this track data import, I come in here and uncheck clips and media. This will tell it, don't bring in any of the clips and media we recorded in the previous session. I want none of that stuff. And all the other types of track data that are associated with those clips directly are also going to uncheck. All right, let's hit OK. Bam. Look at this. Empty clip bin. Tracks are all named the same inputs and outputs, same groups. We still have our nice headphone mix. We have our mix, panning. Everything's good to go. And I can just go to the top, record, enable everything, and record. Just go for it. Without all the explanation, I could have done that in about 30 seconds. So I would have had to open up a blank session, import everything but the clips and media, and bam, I can continue with the next song. And then you have do that each song, and you have a new session for every song you track that day. And you don't have to recreate anything. So hopefully that seems helpful. That's just one useful way, just as an example, that session data can be useful. All right.